The Art Director's Debrief, Jane Eyre Deconstructed, Episode 1, The Red Room, Origin of a Haunted Soul. Hello, and welcome back to the Emotive Archive. Today, we begin our deconstruction of one of the most beloved and influential novels ever written, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. But before we can explore the dark romance of Thornfield Hall or the passionate declarations of its heroine, we must first journey back to the beginning, to the cold, loveless crucible that forged her spirit. The first 5 chapters of this masterpiece are not merely an introduction, they're a profound and harrowing study in childhood trauma, injustice, and the birth of an unbreakable will. In this first part of our analysis, we will conduct a textual autopsy of Jane's early years at Gateshead, culminating in the terrifying, life-altering experience of the Red Room and her subsequent exile to Lowood School. This is the anatomy of a survivor's origins. The novel opens not with a grand event, but with a quiet portrait of absolute isolation. The very first line sets the tone. There was no possibility of taking a walk that day. Jane is immediately established as an outsider, a creature apart. She is not permitted to join her cousins, the Reeds, by the fireside. She is a dependent, an orphan, a discord in the harmony of their wealthy household. Her only solace is in books, a window to other worlds. This act of reading is her first small act of rebellion, an escape into the life of the mind. But even this is denied her. The first act of violence in the novel is not physical, but intellectual. Her cousin, the tyrannical John Reed, discovers her reading a book that belongs to him. He asserts his dominance not just through physical bullying, but by claiming ownership over the very source of her escape. His act of throwing the heavy book at her head is a powerful symbol. It is the brute, ignorant force of the ruling class trying to physically beat down the intellectual aspirations of the powerless. Jane's reaction is the spark that ignites the entire novel. She does not cower, she fights back. She calls him a murderer, a slave driver, a Roman emperor. Her rage is not just the anger of a child, it is the righteous fury of a long-oppressed soul finally finding its voice. This is our first glimpse of the passionate, fiery spirit that defines her. But in the world of Gateshead, this rebellion is not seen as an act of self-defense, it is seen as a transgression. And for this crime, she is sentenced to the novel's first and most iconic Gothic space, the Red Room. The Red Room is not just a spare bedroom, it is a psychological torture chamber. Let us, as art directors, analyze its design. It is a grand, cold, and silent room where her uncle, Mr. Reed, died. Every object within it is a monument to death and solemnity. The massive mahogany bed, the crimson drapery, the deep red carpet. It is a space that resembles a tomb more than a room. The color red, usually associated with passion, is here linked to blood, judgment, and the terrifying authority of the dead patriarch. By locking Jane in this room, Mrs. Reed is not just punishing her, she's attempting to break her spirit by forcing her to confront the ultimate symbols of her own powerlessness and dependence. Jane's experience in the Red Room is a masterclass in psychological horror. Her terror is twofold. First, there is the rational fear of her cruel aunt, but this quickly gives way to a far more profound, supernatural terror. As she looks into the vast dark mirror, she sees a tiny phantom, half fairy, half imp, a strange, otherworldly reflection of herself. This is a moment of profound dissociation, a mind beginning to fracture under unbearable stress. This psychological terror culminates in her vision of a gleam of light, which she interprets as the ghost of her dead uncle, returning to avenge her mistreatment. Her subsequent desperate scream and the resulting fainting fit are not just a child's tantrum, they're the symptoms of a profound traumatic event, a primal scene that will imprint itself upon her psyche and shape her fears for the rest of her life. The aftermath of the Red Room introduces 2 new key figures who represent the opposing forces that will guide Jane's future. The first is Mr. Lloyd, the kind and sensible apothecary. He represents reason, compassion, and a path to potential escape. It is his suggestion of sending Jane to school that opens the first door out of the hell of Gateshead. The second figure is Mr. Brockhorst, the master of Lowood Institution. He is a terrifying figure, a black pillar, a man whose very presence seems to suck the warmth and joy from the room. He is the embodiment of a cold, cruel, and hypocritical form of evangelical Christianity. He interrogates Jane about her soul, preaches a doctrine of poverty and deprivation for his students, while his own family lives in luxury. Mrs. Reed's final cruel act is to lie to Brockhorst, branding Jane with the word deceitful. This is a calculated act of psychological murder, an attempt to poison Jane's future and ensure she will find no love or acceptance in her new home. Jane's final, powerful confrontation with her aunt, where she declares that she will never call her aunt again and that she will tell everyone at her new school of her cruelty, is a triumphant moment of a child speaking truth to power. It is the moment she reclaims her own narrative. But the damage is done. She leaves for Lowood not as an innocent, but as a branded survivor, a young girl already deeply acquainted with injustice, hypocrisy, and the haunting power of the past.
Now that we have anatomized the events of Jane's traumatic childhood, let us elevate our analysis and propose our central thesis for this series. The traditional reading sees Jane Eyre as a romance, a story of a governess who falls in love with her brooding master. We, however, will argue that this is a dangerously incomplete interpretation. We will deconstruct Jane Eyre not as a romance, but as a Gothic psychological thriller about the lifelong battle of a survivor of complex trauma. The love story is not the central plot. It is merely one, albeit crucial, stage in Jane's painful, terrifying, and ultimately triumphant journey to heal a fractured soul. Let us begin by deconstructing the Red Room through a modern psychoanalytic lens. The Red Room is not just a scary room. It is the foundational traumatic event, the primal scene of the novel. It is the moment Jane's psyche is permanently scarred. The room itself is a powerful Freudian symbol, a womb-like space that is also a tomb. It is a space of birth and death, where her independent self is born from the death of her submission. The ghost she sees is not a supernatural entity. It is a projection of her own internal state. It is the ghost of her dead uncle, a symbol of the patriarchal authority that has failed to protect her. But it is also the ghost of her own rage and terror, an externalization of emotions so powerful they threaten to overwhelm her. The fainting fit is a classic trauma response, a mind shutting down to protect itself from an unbearable reality. The Red Room becomes a permanent fixture in her psychological landscape, a room of trauma that she will carry with her for the rest of her life and which will be symbolically recreated in the secret, haunted chambers of Thornfield Hall. With this framework in mind, we can see that her journey is not a simple linear progression from poverty to wealth, but a series of encounters with different forms of institutional and personal abuse and her attempts to survive them. Gateshead Hall is the stage for the trauma of familial abuse. Mrs. Reed is not just a cruel aunt. She is the archetypal abusive guardian, a figure of absolute power who uses psychological and physical violence to maintain control. John Reed is the classic bully, whose cruelty is a product of his own spoiled and unchecked privilege. The entire system of the house is designed to reinforce Jane's status as the other, the outsider who does not belong. Her rebellion is her first attempt to break free from this cycle of abuse. Lowood Institution, where she is sent in Chapter 5, is not a sanctuary. It is the second stage of her trauma, the trauma of institutional abuse. Mr. Brocklehurst is the embodiment of this. He represents a system that uses the language of religion and piety to justify its own cruelty and neglect. The school is a place of starvation, of physical deprivation, and of psychological humiliation. His public branding of Jane as a liar is a deliberate act of institutional gaslighting, an attempt to make her doubt her own reality and submit to his authority. He is a different kind of monster than Mrs. Reed, a colder one, more systematic. But it is at Lowood that Jane encounters her first two models of survival. The first is Miss Temple, the kind superintendent. She represents a compassionate, intellectual form of resistance. She offers Jane warmth, nourishment, both literal and intellectual, and most importantly, she offers her justice by publicly clearing her name. Miss Temple teaches Jane that one can resist a corrupt system from within through intelligence and integrity. The second and more profound model is Helen Burns. She represents a different, more spiritual philosophy of survival, Christian Stoicism. She endures suffering with a quiet, otherworldly patience, believing that her reward will be in the next life. She teaches Jane the power of forgiveness and inner peace. However, Jane, with her fiery, passionate nature, cannot fully accept Helen's philosophy. She says to Helen, "When we are struck at without a reason, we should strike back again very hard." This is a crucial moment. Jane is establishing her own moral code, a code that is based on justice in this world, not the next. While she loves and admires Helen, she instinctively rejects her passive endurance. The tragic death of Helen from consumption is a powerful symbolic moment. It is in a way the death of a part of Jane's own potential path. Bronte suggests that while Helen's philosophy may lead to spiritual peace, it also leads to an early death. To truly survive in this cruel world, Jane will need more than just patience. She will need her fire. In conclusion, these opening chapters are not a simple, sentimental prelude to a love story. They are a brutal, powerful, and psychologically astute depiction of the forging of a survivor who is defined not by her beauty or her social standing, but by her incredible resilience in the face of relentless trauma. The Red Room, Gateshead, and Lowood are not just settings. They are the battlefields where Jane learns to fight for her own soul. The question that these chapters leave us with is a powerful one. Can a soul that has been so deeply wounded, so profoundly haunted, ever truly heal? Can she find a place in the world where she is loved not just for her resilience, but for her whole, complex, and passionate self? The answer to that question lies behind the dark, mysterious, and fire-haunted walls of Thornfield Hall. Thank you for joining me in the Emotive Archive.